So today what I wanted to talk about was the concept that chiropractic is basically founded upon, and pretty much every health care profession is founded upon, which is the body's own innate ability to heal. So when we talk about the term innate, it's generally a natural response. So it's innate, basically the term comes from like a universal intelligence or a force that's basically beyond physical comprehension. So despite the fact that it's present, there isn't necessarily a particularly good way of measuring it. So the easiest way I can explain this is that if you take a wooden table or a wooden door or something made of wood and you looked at a tree, those two structures or materials are made of exactly the same chemical structure. They'll be made up of exactly the same carbon, hydrogen, and oxygen. However, one of them is still a diverse and living organism, and one of them is now an inanimate object. And so the theory is obviously that the innate intelligence, or this universal force, basically separates both the living and the non-living. Now, this is a bit mumbo-jumbo, but really when we kind of look into it and look more depth as chiropractors, we can start to understand what differentiates us from live and inanimate objects. And something that basically differentiates us from an inanimate object as opposed to being alive is a communications-based system within our body. And this is true for plants as well, even though it's slightly different. But what we basically know in all living organisms, as far as animals are concerned, pretty much every living organism has something called a central nervous system. And that central nervous system really seems to be our body's ability to connect with our innate level of force. Now, what we know is that our innate force wants this for us. Our body wants self-healing. Now, essentially, things that will actually start to trigger or change the way that our body's own natural intelligent response will actually react to the environment that we're putting. So there are two things that basically we can do. We can either cause stress or we can de-stress. So if obviously we're stressing the body out, this is essentially where I talked about something called the 3 T's. And the 3 T's basically cover thoughts, toxicity, and trauma. Now, the higher the level of the 3 T's, the lower the level of self-healing. Because essentially increasing the level of the 3 T's is going to block our body's innate intelligence and actually start to damage cells. However, we switch that around and we reduce the 3 T's, our body's ability to self-heal increases. And basically what we know is that we've already got all the building blocks inside of us. Our body naturally has a nerve system that tells us when we're hungry, so that we eat, so we get the right nutrients. Our nerve system knows when a certain tissue is damaged, and so the circulatory system will flood blood to that area and swell so that it can get the nutrients into the area so that area can heal. Our body has all of these functions in place, and what we know is that every single one of those functions is controlled by the nervous system. Chiropractic essentially is looking at people's levels of 3 T's, how that started to affect the nervous system, and how that's actually started to affect the spinal column and the spinal cord, and how that interferes with the process of information coming in and out of the brain. And by actually correcting those dysfunctions, both from a self-help point of view, but actually going in and correcting the nervous system, we can actually start to increase our body's ability to self-heal. So all of the exercises, all of the dietary advice, all of the emotional and meditation advice, all of the adjustments are compounding. They add up to each other. It's like a big company or a business. It's not as good as the individual people, but as a whole, that thing can then work together. We can say the same kind of thing for a car. You could have the wheels on the floor and the chassis, but without the engine, the car simply is not going to move anywhere. And our system is exactly the same. And what we know is there has to be the master controller, and the master controller is the brain. And that is ideally, as chiropractors, what we want to affect. And if we can keep that part working properly, self-healing will occur.